The man arrested over a shooting at an event President Trump was attending on the weekend is expected to appear in court shortly. The suspected gunman has been named as 31-year-old Tomas Allen. He was detained by security agents at the Washington Hilton Hotel. The BBC has learned that President Trump and the White House are standing by the Secret Service leadership. According to a senior White House official, President Trump has said he thinks the Secret Service did an excellent job in stopping the alleged gunman and moving the president, the First Lady, the Vice President and the Cabinet as well to safety. But his Chief of Staff will meet security officials to examine what worked and how to further secure upcoming events. The acting US Attorney General has said the president and his officials were the likely targets. Joe Inwood has more for us.
A scene of chaos in Washington. Outside the ballroom where the president was waiting to speak to many of America's most prominent journalists, a gunman is being tackled. Secret Service agents bundled Donald Trump to the floor. Next to him is Oz Perlman, who was due to provide the evening's entertainment and had been halfway through performing a trick for the First Lady.
He came down right next to me, and we are both on the ground on fours, and I turned, and it's honestly one of the most surreal images in my life. If I didn't live it, I would have thought it was a dream, where we're about half a meter apart, face to face, looking at each other on the ground when I'm hearing shots and thinking to myself, are we about to die?
This is the moment the man burst through a security cordon en route to the ballroom. He was said to be carrying a pistol, a shotgun, as well as a number of knives. The authorities say it was this man, Tomas Allen, who was in that CCTV. The 31-year-old describes himself online as a mechanical engineer, game developer and teacher. The authorities continue to search his home in California. US media say Allen wrote a manifesto in which he talks about his Christian values and explains why he wants to kill Trump administration officials. He reportedly says, "Turning the other cheek is for when you yourself are oppressed," before detailing the way he believes the US government oppresses others. President Trump spoke to CBS News about the document.
I read a manifesto. He's radicalized. He was a Christian, a believer, and then he became an anti-Christian, and he had a lot of change. He's been going through a lot based on what he wrote. His brother complained about him, and I think reported him to the police, and his sister likewise complained about him. His family was very concerned. He was probably a pretty sick guy.
But there are many who argue that far from being an individual problem, what happened over the weekend is a symptom of a societal-wide issue in which political violence across the spectrum is increasingly being normalized.
I think that going forward, if our politics continues to be this, violent, it's going to change our society, it's going to change our culture, it's going to change our democracy. And so I'm calling on people on both sides of the Atlantic to once again treat each other with respect, with decency, with civility, so we can continue to keep our societies open.
Tomas Allen is due to appear in court later today, where he will be formally charged with assault of a federal officer and using a firearm during a crime of violence. It is unlikely those will be the final charges against him, as it is unlikely that this will be the last time the US sees this sort of political violence. Joe Inwood, BBC News.
Jason Park is a retired FBI special agent, currently the CEO of Media Rep Global Strategies, and he told me what the FBI are focusing on right now.
Well, right now the FBI is going through the evidence they've collected as a result of the search warrants they've executed in this case, which is, I'll remind you, is just more than 36 hours old almost. So they've done a lot of work at two different locations. So the FBI Los Angeles field office, where the suspect lived, went to his house, talked to his relatives, talked to neighbors. They're trying to gather a few things. First of all, they're trying to gather the digital evidence from his home, whether that are laptops or phones, any types of things that may lead to that motivation. Secondly, they're talking to neighbors to see if they may have heard anything or may have had any interaction with him that also might lead to a motive. And they're also looking for video. They want to be able to piece the suspect's movements from the time he left his home to the time he got to Washington, D.C. So that whole train trip, they're going to be looking at recreating that and going and looking for clues throughout those places. And at the same time, the evidence folks there in Washington field office where the shooting actually happened, they'll be looking at the ballistics and the forensic evidence there, as well as talking to witnesses at that hotel. So a lot of that will be turned over to the U.S. Attorney's Office there. We talked about your colleague there, Peter, talked about that initial appearance today in federal court. Well, the evidence they're gathering throughout the week here will be turned over to them to see if there are any more appropriate federal charges to bring against the suspect.
And Jason, in your mind, were there security failings here, or perhaps more importantly, screening failures that occurred?
Yeah, I have the utmost respect for the U.S. Secret Service. They're the best in the world at it. I think two things can be true at the same time. I kind of look at these security plans, particularly at known venues, Lucy, kind of like an iron skillet from back in the day when your grandmother told you how to use it. You want to season that thing. You don't want to get a new one every year. So the Washington Hilton has been a venue for lots of high-profile events. The Secret Service, Washington Metro Police, and all the other law enforcement certainly know how to do that. I do think, however, that they may take a look at these screening procedures. I was at the event 3 years ago, and it seemed to be a lot of security, but in talking to people who were there Saturday, I don't know that they didn't, it seemed like there was as much. So I think they'll take a look at those plans, make some of those tweaks, and I really think the bottom line here is he was a guest at the hotel and got past that first layer of screening. So they may take a look at how to revisit that for people who are in the hotel. It's kind of a balance because, you know, you don't want to intrude on the guests, but at the same time you have to secure the president. So their plan worked. The person did not get close to the protectees. So in that sense it worked. But I think in every plan you want to take a look at that and see what you could do better. And I think that's what they'll do.
Do you think, though, inevitably, Jason, this is going to change the whole way that high-profile events like this happen?
Well, I think you have to look at what intelligence you have available and kind of read the room as far as what's going on in their country. There's no doubt that we live in a politically divided society. Unfortunately, a lot of people with strong opinions on both sides. So I think you will have to change how things are done a little bit, but I don't think they're going to want the people who use violence to win either on the left side or the right side or even in the middle. Wherever you are on that, most people come down against violence. And so to that end, I think they're going to try to keep having it where they want to have it and see if there are ways at all that can be changed to make it even more secure. In the end, they don't want to let the terrorists and the people who use violence win.
Well, President Trump says King Charles will be very safe during a state visit to the US, which is due to get underway later today. That follows security discussions on both sides of the Atlantic across the last day. Our senior royal correspondent Daniela Rolfe reports now from Washington.
Security for this state visit was always going to be tight. Events in Washington over the weekend prompted a security review by the UK government and Buckingham Palace. And the visit will go ahead pretty much as planned. The attempted attack on the White House Correspondents' Dinner has added a degree of tension to an already challenging trip for the King and Queen. They arrive with the UK-US relationship under strain to see a president who has been openly critical of Britain and its Prime Minister. But for the most senior UK diplomat in America, this visit is a reminder of the importance of the alliance.
What is so enduring about this relationship? It's that we've had differences. Thatcher to Reagan, Roosevelt with Churchill, actually, over how to handle Stalin. These are moments in the relationship, but actually it endures because it is so deep.
Even before the weekend's events, this was always going to be a highly secure and highly choreographed state visit. The chances for President Trump to get loose-lipped in front of the cameras and in front of the King have been limited.
Thank you very much, everybody. Well, it's a great gentleman and a great king.
There will be few opportunities for this kind of off-the-cuff remark from the president this week. The schedule has been designed to carefully control the moments the King and Donald Trump are together. Back in September, the president's visit to the UK passed off without incident. But the King and Queen are stepping into this trip during more charged political times. The King will not want to provoke or upset his host, but he will want to promote the UK and the value of its relationship with the US. One royal source said it was a complex trip, but carried with it a spirit of hope. Daniela Rolfe, BBC News, Washington.
Zaki Cooper is the former Royal Assistant Press Secretary to Queen Elizabeth. He told me whether there'll be heightened security concerns, though, surrounding the King's visit.
Well, I think there will be. Obviously, we were all shocked by the attack on Saturday at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and I think the King going at this time adds an extra layer of complexity to the security, notwithstanding all the other complexities around this trip. Obviously, we come in the middle of the war in Iran and all sorts of other issues out there. So I think there will have been a lot of thinking done over the weekend and some very diligent security work before the green light was given for the trip to go ahead as originally planned.
Critics of the trip have called President Trump unreliable. We certainly know he's unpredictable, but he is very deferential when it comes to the royals. How will the King handle him, Zaki?
Well, I think the King is one of the most experienced diplomats on the earth, if you think about it. I mean, he's been to the US over 20 times since he first went in 1970 under President Nixon. He went with his sister, Princess Anne. And of course, he's almost unrivaled in the foreign travel he's done all over the world and all the different leaders he's met as Prince of Wales and in the last 3.5 years or so as King. So this is a very seasoned diplomat. I often think of him as our ambassador-in-chief compared to Donald Trump, who's the commander-in-chief. So I think we're very fortunate to have him, and there's no one better placed to handle President Trump than the King.
And given the criticism of the trip from some leading political figures here in the UK, like the head of the Liberal Democrats, Ed Davey, pointing to these threat of tariffs on the UK from President Trump, also the war, as you've mentioned, do you think the trip should be going ahead?
I do. I think there are different approaches here. One can sort of try and disengage from the international order and not go on these trips. Alternatively, one can try and engage, especially where there are disagreements between different countries. And that's really the way we will persuade. I mean, the UK has always been an incredibly persuasive power on the world stage. And the other thing about it is the King is the sort of icing on the cake as the head of state alongside the government, and it's for the government to get into the detailed policy discussions. It's for the King to really strengthen the friendship between our nations. On this 250th year, this is a landmark year, obviously, for the US, and the UK should absolutely be at the heart of acknowledging and marking it.
The big diplomatic centrepiece of the visit will be the King's speech to Congress taking place on Tuesday, Zaki. How much input does the King ever have in these big speeches, these big moments?
Well, I think the government take the lead and they will produce drafts, but the palace obviously will have looked at them and I'm sure put their own gloss on it alongside the King. The King is someone who's got unrivaled experience. He's got firm views on things. So I think he would have taken a look. And also, I think the palace will have looked at previous landmark speeches, such as the late Queen's speech to Congress in 1991, the only time previously that a British monarch has addressed Congress. And then, of course, the Queen's landmark speech for the bicentenary in 1976, 50 years ago, when she went and gave various landmark speeches. But I think the key thing is there's such a history in the relationship between our two countries. Behind me is a wonderful photo of President Reagan with the Queen riding horses in Windsor Castle back in 1982. This was part of an exhibition that we put on at the Foreign Office last year, and we hope to reprise for the 250th. So I think there's a wonderful history there, and the King's visit is part of that overall historical narrative.
So just